you're just going to bring a lot of fun around this conversation. If you don't know Jim yet, he is an executive at Faith Life, and a broad-based title, you're like tech executive. Yeah. So in charge of all different sorts of elements surrounding how they manage their internal infrastructure and their lines of business. And he handles everything from what happens when somebody drops a key card, because you might know that they have a multi-campus approach downtown of now 6 that people key card in and out of. So he's going to talk today, I believe, about some of those real and cyber security issues and how they mitigate those and retain a culture that's about freedom and innovation. And I met Shay about 5 months ago now, I think, and he's one of the people that we're really lucky to have in this region that moved here because he likes the area. He works for the U.S. government and is a really awesome new influence in Bellingham, so watch out, fun tech sector. So I'm really pleased that the two of them are going to talk about Outrunning the Bear. We talked a lot about the different potential titles, and I know they put a lot of thought and consideration into how to bring some seasoning to what they're experiencing in their job roles. So thank you both for talking, and I think. Sorry. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, so hey Tag, thanks for putting this on. This is really incredible. I'm really impressed at the quality of speakers, the content, a lot of incredible takeaways. Yeah, so I'm Jim, I work at Faith Life. I'm a member of the executive team. My title is Jim. I run development, operations, security, and recruiting. Hold mic like so, okay. A lot of stuff going on. The security aspect is what I'll be here talking about, and Shay.
Yeah, so my name is Shay Colson. I'm a cybersecurity engineer for the U.S. Department of the Treasury, which obligates me to tell you that I am here expressing views that are mine and mine alone and do not necessarily reflect those of my agency or the federal government. But that's good because it gives me a little more leeway to dig into things. And I do want to take credit for the title up front, for better or for worse. That was mine. I won't put that on Jim. And I do want to tell the story because I think maybe there's some people who don't know that joke. And so it goes like this. There's 2 hikers out in the woods. They're going down the trail, and all of a sudden they round the corner and there's a bear right in the middle of the trail. And they realize they're between the bear and the cub. And the bear starts chasing them, and they take off running. And one of the hikers stops and starts taking off their boots and putting on their running shoes. And the other hiker goes, "What are you doing? You can't outrun a bear." And the other one goes, "Oh, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." And we heard some of that this morning. All you have to do is be more secure than your neighbor and be harder to get to than the other guy because, hackers are motivated by easy opportunities. So if you're facing an advanced persistent threat from China or an insider who really wants to get your stuff, we can't help you in 45 minutes. But we can help you get farther than your neighbor down the trail, except it's different in cyber, right? So you're not just walking through the woods. In cyber, you're in a pitch black forest with a headlamp on your head and that's it. So 1, you can't see the bear. 2, you can't see the other guy. And 3, you can only see what's directly in front of your headlamp, right? If it's off the trail, if it's off to the side, you can't see it. You don't know what's out there. So in that first sense of not being able to see the bear, we don't know what the next attack is, right? We don't know what the next 0 day is going to be or the next heartbleed or whatever else. So we can't look back and see how fast we have to run or how we should spend our security resources. 2, we can't see where the other guy is. So we don't know how secure we have to make ourselves to be less likely to be attacked or to be vulnerable. So again, we don't know how fast to run. How do we spend our security resources? And 3, we can only see what we're aware of and know to look for and identify, right? The unknown unknowns in cyber are overwhelming. So when Jim and I were putting together this presentation, we spent hours meeting about this.
It's like at least one.
No, multiple, right?
Okay, two.
Yeah, two. Plus, I don't know, I write emails slowly, so maybe extra hours for me. And talking about how to do this. And we played with a lot of options on how to give actionable takeaways for you guys to outrun the bear. And what we realized is that we were failing, right? And we're failing because we have the same challenge you do. There's 1,000 things you could do to be more secure. You could go into the office tomorrow and do any one of these things and be better off. But what do you do first? Where do you start? And so what we wanted to do today was actually facilitate a little bit more of a conversation around some of the security issues you're seeing in your roles and in your organizations, and do a little interplay. Jim will represent the executive and the operational side of the house, and I live at the bottom of a very tall totem pole, so I'll handle the technical side and kind of the best practices. I don't get to make decisions in my role. Jim basically only makes decisions, so. But we're going to let you guys drive it. Is that?
Sounds good.
Okay. So if I can get my cord untangled from my chair.
Yeah, we really like the bear analogy because oftentimes it's like, where do you start, right? And a lot of people got kind of paralyzed with that, where do I start? And one of the messages we wanted everyone to come away with is just somewhere, like pick something, do one, and then continue. The biggest challenge I've got with respect to security in a private enterprise that's trying to produce consumer-grade software is security is just directly in tension with innovation, right? It's like, if you're going to go invest in security, that means you're not investing in innovation, and there's no additional value add to the consumer other than protecting their information, but you're not going to beat your competitor. Like, if your competitor gets hacked, sure, you've got a better PR win, but you're not edging out. So it's this constant tension between how much resource do I put into a security problem versus something else. So we're going to kind of go back and forth on some stories out there in the industry to kind of give some context around the stuff. And obviously, like Shay said, we want audience participation. If you want to riff off whatever we're going off, just like shove your hand up and start screaming, whatever. So I do this security speech at work. Whenever somebody comes on board, we do security training, like, give them an anecdotal sense of what it likes to have a secure infrastructure, because we give them the paper manual and they read it, right? Like, they skim it and throw it away and never actually, think twice about it. And the problem with that is you're kind of like, breeding complacency. If you check the checkbox, I read your security policy, so I'm secure, that's not really a culture of security. You're not actually guarding against anything. So one of the stories I like to tell to give some context around this is the story of Matt Honan. So Matt Honan is a popular technology author. He writes for Wired, and you may have read his article where his entire Apple identity was stolen and his digital life erased. And he kind of goes into great detail about it. And it basically hinges on identity verification across all of these new cloud providers. He was an Amazon customer, he was an Apple customer, and all these kinds of things. And so the way the hack plays out here is the hacker one day decides he wants to take control of Matt Honan's Twitter handle, @Matt, M-A-T, or M-A-T-T. And so he figures out who Matt Honan is, and basically going through domain registration to figure it all out. And then he calls up Amazon and says, hey, I'm Matt Honan at whatever.com, and I would like to add a credit card to my file. And Amazon says, great, because they're in the business of capturing credit cards. So no resistance there to get that new credit card in. And hacker's like, sweet, hangs up the phone, immediately calls back and says, hey, I'm Matt Honan, and these are the last 4 digits of my credit card. I would like advanced access into my account. And because he had the last 4 digits of a credit card on file, he was allowed through. So sort of gate number 1 passed. And then once he was in there, he was able to extract the real last 4 digits of Matt's real credit card number, call up Apple, and use that to bypass Apple's security system, identity verification, and then from there acquired his, effectively Apple ID and everything he owned, and remotely wiped. The big tragedy here, if you read the article, is he eliminated the first year of his daughter's life in photos. Right? It's like all the photos that he had of his kid gone forever. So we play this out in our company. We were taking phone calls all day. At some level in the Bible software business, there's not a ton of fraud, right? We don't have a lot of people coming in trying to sort of spoof to steal the latest Bible software package. If you're doing that, you're probably not, product's not intended to you. But we're more of a lily pad to jump off, like Amazon was in this story. And so I tell the story to everybody so that they understand when they're talking to the customer that, if you've got your spidey sense firing off, that this feels fraudy. Somebody's giving me semi-accurate information that, doesn't necessarily feel like a customer. You have sort of two responsibilities. One is report that, and we'll go investigate it. And then don't accuse the customer because they may just be sort of awkward. So again, this is sort of tension that plays in it. So love that story for knowing how to handle social hackery there.
Yeah, and so the other thing that we realized as we talked through this panel is none of you are in the business of cybersecurity. You all do other things. And cyber, I think Sean said this morning, that's just table stakes, right? It's something that you have to do whatever it is, as a nonprofit, as an educational institution, as a maker of widgets, provider of services. So if you have something that you're worried about security-wise, I'm sure other people in this room are worried about it. You can also raise your hand and say, I'm asking for a friend. This isn't me, but I have a friend who has this problem, right? Because we know you don't necessarily want to say, hi, I'm blank from organization X, and we're really vulnerable in this scenario, right? So don't be shy. We've got stories, but if anybody wants to steer the conversation to a particular area that they maybe haven't seen a lot of this morning or wanted to get more of, now would be a good chance to raise your hand and interject, because we could do story time for a while, but we want to get over this post-lunch slump. I'm just waiting for a hand to go up, really. More stories? All right. Well, I want to build on what Mark said this morning about okay, all right. Brian's got his hand up in the back. Password policies, excellent. So password policies are funny because it seems so easy, right? Have a good password. Okay, great. By now everybody knows what a good password is, right? It's not password, it's not password one, but those really are the things that people end up using because they're convenient. Right? So I don't know what the Logos password policy is, but in Fedland it's 12 characters, complex, right? So uppercase, lowercase, letters, numbers, special characters, and then on top of that you have to change it on a regular basis, right? 30 days, 90 days, whatever. You also have to have a different password for an administrator level account, right? So elevated, you need to up the bar a little bit. And you also can't share your password with anybody. But these are all things that we see happening in the organization just to get something done. So it's worth thinking through what that is, right? So complex, how often you change it. For us, it has to be different than your last 24 passwords, right? So you can't reuse these things. I know people do things like complex phrase and then 1 through 24. But that just defeats the purpose. And then some way to think about the back end of that, right? So when someone leaves, how quickly can you get back and revoke those accounts? Which, moving a little bit beyond passwords, but that's what I would offer on passwords. Yeah,
passwords are becoming more and more a facade to security. We at Faith Life, we comply with the payment card industry's data security standard password requirements, and the particularly troublesome one is it requires us to change it every 3 months. And this is like, there's been a lot of study on if you force people to change it all the time, they then write it down or put it somewhere that then makes it accessible, right? Which actually increases its attack. So you have to bring in, the one thing we've adopted at kind of the core layer in our infrastructure is two-factor authentication. And we're going to be pushing that more and more out to the perimeter. It's got this tension of like, oh great, every time I fire up a VPN connection or log into email, I have to pull my phone out. But it's a trade-off, right? If you do that every time, then it's one more gate for someone else to jump over. I think that you'll see over time more systems that have to augment the password because they're just, I just imagine like the hacker Excel sheet, sitting in like, iCloud in Russia, and it's like my name, my bank balance, and my address, and like confirmed through Amazon and Google and everything. And the password will be in there, and if you layer up a different protection over the top of that stuff, you protect yourself more. So. Yeah, I hate them. I hate passwords, right? Like, it's just like, it's bad from all angles. You know, we all thought RSA's encryption algorithms were airtight, and then they weren't, right? And so I feel like it's always going to be all your eggs in one basket. So difficult game. Yeah, so we use a password, you know, something is better than nothing. So at the office we use, boy, I forget the name of the product now, but it's a password management server on our infrastructure, and all of it's put in there, and it's got, you know, granular controls over who gets what and all this. Then, you know, with the bring your own device thing, it all gets complicated, right? Because then everyone's like, well, I just go ahead and put my stuff in my own 1Pass account, which then has this reciprocal problem of if that person decides to leave, they like take off with your passwords. Yeah.
But then you can easily change them because nobody really knows what it is. It's just this long, complex string that you store remotely.
Yes.
So, which also is a benefit on the personal side if you know, oh, Dropbox got hacked. Well, if your Dropbox password is 80 characters randomly generated that you use this manager to deal with, it's really easy to generate another one and drop it in. And again, you're just trying to stay ahead of the bear, right? So there's somebody out there who is username, which is their email address, and their password is password. You're ahead of them. So. Yes. Yeah, I mean, they would obviously be a great target, but depending on what you use, they do other things too, right? So LastPass is an interesting example of what I think is actually a pretty well done password in the sense that it is stored as an encrypted set, right? And it's done so that LastPass can't decrypt it. And you can also download it locally and store it locally, and it stays encrypted, right? And it's only decrypted when the hashes, it's pretty elegant how they actually do it, right? The hashes match, and then that's how it actually is revealed. So stored, encrypted, transmitted, encrypted. You can keep a local copy if you don't trust LastPass. And again, it's better than having to remember 24, or worse, using the same password for all your accounts, so when they get Dropbox, then they go straight to Bank of America and get in, right? Yes, Sean. Right. So single sign-on is, yeah. So Sean's asking to follow on with that about the advantages of single sign-on, where the idea is you have one set of credentials that will allow you to access multiple services. And I think done well, it's a great opportunity. So for us, it's two-factor authentication. That is something that you know, a password, and something that you have, a smart card. So at Faith Life, they text you your second factor, right?
We use the Google Authenticate system.
You may be familiar with the RSA keys, where it's a 6-digit thing that changes every minute or 5 minutes or whatever that you also have to put in. So again, the idea is you're just raising that bar. And if your two-factor authentication is stronger than you think the passwords would be, I think that's a big win. Plus, it gives you management capabilities on the back end, right? So if somebody calls up and says, hey, I lost my smart card, you can lock all their accounts down until that's replaced. So there's advantages to it in the management side, but generally lets people get business done without having to flip their keyboard over and find the sticky note with that one password and then turn it back over and put it in.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about single sign-on, we've got it in the context of our organization. You log into your computer, it logs you into your email, it logs you into the wiki, it logs you into everything else, and that's really convenient. But then you've got, you know, the internet is connecting many different businesses together all the time, and so you've got, you know, these internet standards like OAuth for a shared authentication provider. And this is always a really fun trade-off whenever you see the, like, okay, sign in with Google button, right, and you hit it, and then it's like, great, you know, don't worry, they won't have your password, but they will know everyone that you know, everywhere that you've been, and, you know, everything you've been saying. Oh, okay, that sounds good, you know, like, so it's these awkward trade-offs between sort of ease of use and perceived security.
Go ahead. Well, I think there's a little bit of discussion on the cloud after this. But I'll offer a general take on it, which is if you're not really in the business of maintaining servers at a secure level, or if you don't pay someone to do that for you on site, the cloud has probably more positives than negatives. You are in a highly regulated industry, so you have particular challenges with moving to the cloud. But if you can have someone else who spends their whole day making the servers secure and available and the things that you need them to do, generally that's a better bet than trying to do that yourself while you're also doing the thing that you actually do to make money. So that would be my general advice on the cloud.
Yeah, so we've been driving Google Apps for Business into our environment. We're a 22-year-old business. You walk in the door and they're like, great, here's your Windows computer and the network file system's over there, and you fire up Excel and Word to do business. And the millennial comes in and they're like, bro, what's Microsoft? Is that a startup? And so they're busy pumping, their whole life is online, they're already using cloud-enabled services, and so there's this, if we tried to deliver an equivalent system as Google Apps for Business, which is a collaborative editing tool, an infinite storage mechanism, and persistent across all of your devices, we just fail, right? It's like, what am I going to spin up SharePoint? I mean, laughter ensues, right? I mean, so it's an incredible tool for us to essentially collect our IP back. Now, you've got the problem of all of our IPs on Google, which we're, a search engine for biblical studies. You want them reading your data. It's sort of like, it's just, for us, it's not a competitive advantage to invest all the resources to try to compete on our productivity suite. Now, when it comes to the actual data that we store, so we've got our customers' purchasing history, and then they're taking actual, there's user-generated content. And so then we've got this tension around owning and operating the hardware and leasing compute from any number of cloud providers. And we've come to, ours is more of a control decision than a security decision. So if we own and operate all of our gear, it's down here at Fiber Cloud, we're turning up in the Telex facility in Tukwila, and we're building that physical infrastructure out, and I'm incredibly reluctant to do it because that's actually a lot of work in comparison to clicking the button on Amazon to give me more compute. But eventually that breaks down, and with total control, we're better. And so we invest heavily in protections around that user-generated content on equipment that we own. So it's, again, a series of trade-offs.
But mostly a business decision.
An economic decision.
Right, driven not so much by security, but by business, which is, I think, one of the nice recurring themes of the event today is you've got to figure out what it is that you do that people pay you for. You've got to protect your ability to do that and maybe enhance it with technology, and as best as you can, ensure that a negative event doesn't prevent you from continuing to do that thing. Right? So these are all business decisions that you can do in a tabletop exercise or a roundtable discussion before you go to a vendor and say, hey, I need your software right now so that X. Yes, Sean, a vendor who's going to say, buy my software. I'm kidding.
It sounds like you were on Exchange before, maybe, because you were talking about standing up SharePoint. But I mean, why Google Apps for Business instead of why Google Apps for Business instead of Office 365?
Google has won the enterprise by supporting multiple platforms first. We tried to drive Office into our organization because we could have federated it with our Active Directory system in some potentially trustworthy way. But then you fire up the Mac app, and then, oh, you want that to work on iOS? Just kidding. And it's just like, we hired a guy out of the Office for mobile organization. And there was this top, when I say top, I mean, he's like, Steve Ballmer is responsible for not letting us fix authentication. It was like, we even had to maintain different sets of credentials on our system versus their system. It's just shenanigans. Google comes in and it's like, oh, it works everywhere. And then, here's your password and you're done. So it was just superior product and in almost every way. From a let's say if I want to do pivot table work, advanced analysis, Excel still wins, like Google Apps for Business spreadsheets. So in our environment, some people are still running that more powerful tool, but 90% of people use Excel to keep a single column list of groceries. So it was good enough.
Yep.
One of my experiences is that you take an issue with passwords on Android for our customers. One of the biggest things is people that I don't want to be sitting and downloading free stuff. And then they say, well, we bought a really expensive firewall. How did that happen? Why didn't we get protected? Well, it's because they were downloading free stuff that was infected with password plus. How do you guys recommend
shame?
I think one of the answers is that this problem will fix itself very quickly because people are going to be on their phones, right? So if you just make it harder to get to what they want on their corporate desktop, they'll just pull out their phone and get on Facebook or get on whatever they're trying to get to. So just lock it down enough so they're like, you know what, I don't really need to do that. Or if this employee is repeat offender, that's a training opportunity. But a lot of people would rather not store all that stuff and use their work computer to do all that stuff, right? And they pull out their phones, and that at least solves that problem. Again, that's a different problem, but you don't have all the malware coming in. Kind of a non-answer answer. Maybe you have a real answer.
Visibility on that's hard. Again, it's like this, are we going to spend time to hire hall monitors that walk around and rap knuckles? I think with respect to people do bad behavior to bring viruses into the organization, but there's also perfectly natural behavior that is also vulnerable to attack. So my kind of favorite story here is CryptoLocker. So CryptoLocker is this malware, ransomware that they pointed at the executive, and it's like some attached file, and then you run it, and it basically runs across your entire network and encrypts everything and demands $50,000 equivalent of Bitcoin, and you can have all your data back. And it's, you can totally see how someone would fall for the click the attachment thing. So, how do you protect against CryptoLocker? So first of all, you have to have, day zero is always a problem for you, so there's going to be that gap in time. You can have signature-based controls watching for that particular traffic on the network. You can have antivirus software running. But if you go out and read around the internet, how do you really stop CryptoLocker from ever coming in through email? The answer is don't open attachments and don't click links in your email, right? It's like, this is an activity that I do 100 times a day. Stop that, and so I think that there is some practical thing. I'd sort of put a spin on that, which is stop sending attachments. The PDF attachment is what is this? 1998, and text can go in an email, and you can just read it there. And that, if you practice that, if you find yourself sending out attachments because you're using a local Word document to do stuff, email can show text too, and right, it's like the validity of the email is so much more apparent when you can read what would otherwise be in the attachment. You can even attach it, right? But it's so much easier to read the text straight in the email versus having to open it. You're doing a favor to your reader, and you're also kind of giving them an opportunity to verify the validity of the message. Whereas if another one comes in and it's got the attachment and it's just reduced mortgage rates, you have that looks like more noise than signal, and you have an opportunity to delete it. And just sort of digging into the links problem, there's two sides to all these coins, right? There was this Google phishing attack that was going around. Somebody had put up a sign-in dialogue that looked almost identical to Google's sign-in dialogue on a Google App Engine system or something like this. And it was actually hanging off the google.com domain, right? So it's you get this link, and it's click here to see a spreadsheet or whatever it is, and you fire up a website, and boom, you're on google.com, so you're trusted. It gives you the sign-in dialogue, and this thing was, probably 90% effective at convincing you to punch your information into that. I think people have figured out the common sense angle. I shouldn't peer-to-peer music share, but it's the stuff that's now that we wish was common sense for people operating these computers, and they have no chance, right? So,
other questions? No. One of the stories that I wanted to share, I shared with Mark in the lunch line today, a little bit more on Unit 61398 out of China and how advanced these things are getting. Your Google example is a great one. You're not going to notice that 9 times out of 10, right? So Mandiant is a security research firm in Northern Virginia, and they put out this report on the Chinese hackers. APT1 is the name of the report, and they were hesitant to release it for two reasons. One is it details sources and methodologies for pretty advanced attacks that very few people were using, but if they were out in the wild, more people could use, because they'd be like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here, let me also do that. But two, they were worried about getting blowback from the hackers, right? They didn't want to put themselves at risk, by outing them, but they decided for the good of the community they would go ahead and publish this report. And so instead of hacking Mandiant, what did Unit 61398 do? They downloaded the PDF, inserted their own malware, because who better to hack than people who don't want to be hacked by the Chinese hackers, and then put it back in the wild. So when people were like, oh, I need to read this report about how not to get hacked by the Chinese hackers, they clicked it to open it, and boom. It was the real report. You still got to read it, but then your network was toast, and you didn't know it, right? So that's the game that's being played, and the consumer grade version is this Google App Engine attack, but sometimes you can't avoid it, right? It's just.
Yeah, security is this, like everyone hates it, right? It's like if you say security, they're like, oh, I'm so bad and it's so hard and all this. Creating a culture of awareness is pretty key. So you see a lot of people doing, reward-based systems. So Google Chromium was one I just recently stumbled across, where if you find a security vulnerability in the Google Chromium engine and you report it, you can get between it's 500 to 15 grand, right? And so you could make a real living out of just sitting around finding holes in it. And Yahoo got in trouble because somebody found a vulnerability for them, and it was like the security guy. Yahoo didn't have a budget for thanking people, so he bought a T-shirt with his own dime, and he thanks Yahoo for the $12 T-shirt. In our organization, what I've yet to push out, because I got to get approval on this, is what I want to do is create rewards for people for alerting. These emails that come through, they're phishing attacks. We tell people, keep an eye out for them. Please report them, even if you didn't fall for it. Let us know, because what we'll do is an analysis to see if anybody else fell for it. And we do a lot of buying through Best Buy, and Best Buy has this great reward zone system where you accrue a balance and you can buy stuff. And we're up to $1,000 on this balance that will go apply to the next laptop or whatever. But we can use it as a bounty internally, right? So it's I'll reward $100 to somebody who's the first reporter of a phishing attack that either themselves or other people got, and if it even I'll ratchet it up if it results in us if somebody fell for it and brought some stuff in it, we'll crank it up and really thank them with just this little reward budget that we've got. So that really helps to kind of foster a culture of care and vigilance and openness about it, as opposed to people just deleting it. So.
Anybody else? So one of the things that I think is interesting about this problem is how low the bar really is to outrun the bear. And there were platitudes and statistics this morning. It is low, right? So if you know what you have in terms of systems, what you have in terms of software, and what you have in terms of data, you're significantly further ahead than most, right? So that was one of the challenges with Heartbleed is it only affects particular versions of a particular piece of software. Are you able to say, oh, I know that we have X instances of that running in my enterprise, and it's on these machines, and I know where it is, and I can go patch it, and now I'm covered? Probably not. So to get up to speed and to get really far ahead of that bear, if you can figure out, what are you running? Where is it running? Do you need that running? Do you have a bunch of things running that you don't ever use, right? Is your printer able to get to the internet? Can people send things from home to be printed at the office? Okay, what else does that mean, right? That means anybody on the internet can get to your printer. The same printer that prints all your sensitive stuff and stores it in its giant 1 gig RAM chip that's in the printer that you didn't even know was there, right? So the bar is much more about sticking your head up, taking a good look at yourself, and then on the business side, all right, what is all of this worth to us? And then how do we allocate spend to protect it? So that's the mental exercise of getting out of this bear chase in a dark forest. And maybe you can shed some light on that from the executive side, because I know it's easy to sit up here as the engineer and say that, but I'm sure it's harder to sit as the executive and say, okay, how do we do that and still meet Q4 goals?
Sorry, I was preparing for my next topic. Could you re-ask the question?
Yeah. So your team has to do their day job, but you also want them to do this other whole entire job that is not easy to do, not quick, and very important. Great,
thank you. Because there's this conflict between security and innovation, your best effort against it is to make the security piece one person's job and not the innovation side, right? So you therefore avoiding the conflict. I think that's probably the best first step is like, I can just imagine the small internet business startup where it's like, I sell widgets and I've been doing it in brick and mortar and now I'm gonna start doing it online and it's really taken off and oh no, I've got all these customers and all this data and it's just a deluge. And you're out there trying to like run a business or run some particular part about it. And you end up in this ostrich security model, which we had the photo of, you bury your head underground and hope no one kicks you in the butt. But if you actually, make it somebody's responsibility and be clear about that and hold them accountable, you can at least someone's gonna be willing to build their career out of it, take it as a responsibility, and if you really, make that like kind of well spelled out, that's the best start you can do. Because even if they're not good at it, like I said earlier, it's like a lot of people just are paralyzed by the different areas you can go into, but just starting forward is key, and having that person to start is key.
Yeah, and I think you can do it from the other side too, and put responsibility to the data ownership as well. So maybe somebody is responsible for all of your customer data, and now they get to say whether it goes on this system or not. And if they don't give the approval, you can't use this new system to do customer data. And it gives them the incentive to say, okay, I understand why you want to do that, but you can't just put it on Dropbox so that you can get it to the guy who's going to Europe for the conference. So,
like what I've run into is trying to take the approach of like security is everyone's responsibility. The result is it's nobody's responsibility. So again, just kind of emphasizing like pick an owner.
yes.
Yes. Or what's worse is you're only good as good as they are, right? It's like, yes, it's secure, I did it, right? Well, what if you miss something, right? Absolutely. So our business is we're required to do a payment card industry data security standard self-assessment, which means there are, and this is what you'll find in compliance. It's like there's a gazillion different compliance methods. For us, it's around storing, transmitting, and processing credit card information. If you're a health records, it's HIPAA and all those things. They all have the same sort of categories of compliance, right? It's like your network and data retention and access control and all this kind of stuff. And in our particular compliance document, we're required to have a third party do intrusion testing, vulnerability scanning and intrusion testing. And so all we have to do where we're at is have somebody sort of run those scans. And then you get into this problem of like, you're compliant but not secure. Like I can check the checkbox because somebody ran a scan, but again, you're vulnerable to how quality of their scan is. We're now getting to the point where we've internally turned like, I recently had a designated hacker on staff. It was like, your job is finding vulnerabilities. And she was pretty fantastic at it. She found a vulnerability, kind of a man-in-the-middle attack on we've got many different properties. When you log into one of these web properties, you're gonna log into all of them. And she found a vulnerability where you could basically grab the token in transit and start impersonating somebody. And she found that because she was banging on it, as the hacker. And the guy who wrote it was very confident in this amazingly secure cross-domain authentication system and was never going to find this bug because he wrote it. And so we're getting to the point now where we're probably going to start, really going after hiring outside people to do the same type of work. It's expensive. I mean, it's like our main property, I want to say it's, a $30,000 engagement to go top to bottom and try to find a vulnerability. And then there are many different sites. And so that's why this is like the brilliance of the bounty programs, because you're harnessing, a broader community of people beating up on them. You get way more, like the dollar per bug ratio is way better for you. We're just kind of not at that scale yet that we want to go start asking people, please don't start hammering our systems. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at there.
But if you did maybe break your system, you could let Jim know, and he might offer you a job instead of a bounty.
Yeah, totally. Like we're on the spot.
All of you Whatcom students, check with your ethics professor first, but
right before you hit the like execute.
Maybe send a screenshot ready to go, but you didn't do it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Can I have a job?
But the
I
FBI
drained
guy
your
from
bank
before might
account.
come out if that's the case. Are there other questions? These are good, and so I'm hopeful that other people are learning the ones that didn't ask them. Yes, in the back, sir.
As a private business, I mean, what tools do we have to try and at least have some sort of measurement or baseline for how to choose various vendors, especially when we're dealing with the cloud, and how well they're adapted on the security side to protect my data,
Sure.
my customer data, choosing a credit card vendor, et cetera, et cetera. Are there great baselines that you guys use, baseline to say, this is kind of our standard, and we look for this across various vendors, or
Yeah, so I'll pick our credit card tokenization provider. So many years ago, we used to, people store credit cards on file with us. And we had a whole team dedicated towards, catching that credit card, encrypting it, storing it in a local data store that we would then need to, we couldn't just hash it, we needed access to it again, so it had to be, decryptable. And you've got all of these problems of like, okay, now you have to nominate the key custodian, and the key custodian has to rotate the key every year, and it's this like horrible, like, oh, I hope I rotate it right, and I don't just lock them all to where nobody can get to them. It was just a nightmare. And so one day we're like, why are we even bothering? And so we went out and surveyed the field of who could store the credit cards for us. And we settled with a company called CyberSource, who is there were a bunch of different vendors in the field, and they were just big and owned by Visa and really reasonably priced. So it's just like win-win-win, right? I mean, it's like ultimately if the credit card numbers get stolen, this is a PR nightmare for us, and we have the ability right now, if they do, it's because Visa lost them, right? It's like the brand on your credit card lost the credit card, so we had no chance, which is why we don't store them. So that one really worked out for us. With respect to our third-party vulnerability scanner, we have the same metric for evaluating a vendor from security as we do for kind of anything. We look for the right size. So we contrasted to Dell SecureWorks is kind of the big name brand in intrusion detection, and who we're looking at to hire to do a vulnerability assessment of our web property, and we're working with a smaller player called Coalfire down in Seattle. And the difference, you can see the difference. I mean, they're both excellent organizations. When we talk to Coalfire, they're more of they're a small organization trying to make a business out of security, and they'll bend over backwards for us. I mean, it's like we just get excellent service out of it. They'll really work with us. When you talk to Dell SecureWorks, it's like, an impenetrable wall of consultants that you have to talk to before you finally, sign a contract that's, too long to read. But what they have available to them is like, their big asset is these 60 researchers across the world that are effectively, double agents in the hacker, conversation rooms, and they could be like, hey, you're about to get attacked like tomorrow, right? And you just have to measure for where you're at in your business, where you're at. So I think, if you're at the small end of the scale, pick a mid-market player. If you're a mid-market player, pick a big market player. Is probably a good, easy rule.
So again, a business decision, not necessarily a security decision.
Yeah, and really hard
right?
one. The other thing is with respect to it being a decision is we're known among our vendors for being particularly difficult. If FiberCloud, if you're here, thank you for all of your patience. We really aggressively evaluate everything every time a bill comes up, right? It's like when the invoice comes in, we're like, really, should we be doing this? And we've just built this culture of just, aggressive, we just pit the other vendors against them and let them duke it out. And you'll find that strategy picks the winner. I mean, like the quality of service comes out if you're constantly kind of retooling and rebidding and looking what's out there.
But I would add, and picking vendors is a very, very different thing in my side of the house. But again, going back to why this vendor, why this product, why now? If this is the best strategic thing for you to do, great. If it's the thing that's hot right now in the moment, but really you could spend that money a lot better, that's another thing to think about. So before you get to the vendor or product level decision, hopefully it's merging into the larger strategy. And particularly as we saw in some of Sean's slides, we know that's not happening for the best of breed in financial services. So it might not be happening all the way down the chain.
Security Solutions, I got to plug them because they're fantastic. If you've got a local business and you need access control systems, call them immediately because they're excellent. My favorite story, video surveillance is like my favorite security control that we have in. I mean, there's nothing provides more entertainment than video surveillance. And you may have seen, it was like 2012 or something like this. I got a call middle of the night from the emergency response line. Jim, a window is broken and there's a cinder block inside the office. And so I go running in, the cops are already there and they're checking it out. And the guy, we had a video surveillance camera pointed right at this back door. And somebody, my assumption is they come stumbling out of the bar, disgruntled about being angstful youth, acquires a cinder block, walks up to one of our doors, throws it against a window and it like bounces off, which is kind of funny. He didn't throw it hard enough there, and then he pivots and he throws it right at the door. I mean, just like smash, bang, and it's like we've got this shot of him like almost grinning as it goes through. And so I'm like, oh no, I wake up, I capture the video footage, and our director of marketing, who's a genius at marketing, Dan Pritchett, he's like, oh, this is just like social media gold. So he posted online and it starts going around and like Como picks it up and King 5 picks it up. It's like local punk kid breaks window, and eventually his grandma sees the clip and is like, Johnny, how could you do this? And then worked it off, paid us back for the broken window. Sort of, this is sort of like whole like turning over a new leaf story going on, and because of the coverage, we were able to identify like it was like $30,000 or $40,000 in sales that day because of the backlink traffic of people. Oh, what's this Logos thing? Oh, check it out. So you can always have sometimes a win out of some of these things. Love that one.
So we probably got time for one more topic. Yes, in the hat. Yeah.
We're not monitoring packets on that level, so how do you know something like that's happening?
So the question for those who couldn't hear was detection of malicious traffic. Do you have a product or appliance that you like? And I'm going to give the easy answer so you can give the hard one. The first one is you've got to know what your regular traffic is like first before you can detect what's malicious, right? So if you don't have a baseline, if you're not capturing logs and feeding them into something that helps you review them, if you don't understand what is a day-to-day operation, how do you know that that's not connected to the actual work, right? So that's the first part. The second part is it's getting really hard, right? It used to be like, oh, is this IP in China / Russia / other malicious country? Then yeah, that's probably bad. But now they just take over a computer in Maryland, and then that becomes the hop point out to China. So, oh, you're connecting with Maryland, which is where you usually connect with. No, nothing going on here, but actually that's really bad things going on. So you've got to do that awareness. Like a lot of the other things we're seeing, what is it like normally? What's your baseline so you can detect that change maliciously? From a product perspective, maybe that's better for you.
I guess I'd emphasize open source technologies. We, in my day job, we're kind of exploding from a cloud platform provider, and the bigger vendor solutions, if you look at any edge appliance provider like Cisco or F5, there's many HP. They're going to have the licensed version of their intrusion detection and intrusion prevention system, which is basically going to give you a deluge of false positives that you have to spend your entire life combing through and gain some understanding around. There's a really robust open source community around the same problem. And what I found is that the open source community is a bit more active and easier to plug into because you've got the real people sort of in the same boat as you. And so as opposed to when you're working with a big vendor like F5, they kind of it's sort of, they take this turnkey approach. It's like, here's the template for your Exchange server, you're done. And right, you're wanting to just sort of turn it on and just email me if I'm under attack and that kind of thing. And that's just, it's invariably that just sort of lulls you to sleep. And if you go after the open source technology, you tend to be a little bit closer to what is actually going on because there's not a lot of turnkeys available. You have to kind of figure it out. And then you also get plugged into a community of people that can kind of help you understand and wade through it. So really emphasize that angle.
All right, so I think there's more breakout sessions next. I'm sure Meg is near a microphone and can explain it to everyone.
Thanks, Shay.
Yeah.
That was really fantastic. Thank you guys both for your contributions. So we really want you to leave today with some actionable next steps, and we've got a lot of programming left. But if you haven't yet looked at your scorecards, they're in the front, they're colored, they're heavy cardstock. Please check them out. And we